I've always thoroughly enjoyed building Legos. There's something about putting the pieces together and creating something while turning off your mind that just removes all stress from that particular instance in time. Whether I'm exhausted or mourning the loss of a loved one or am just overstressed, I've found that Legos can be extremely calming when I'm under these conditions. When building a Lego set, you are faced with two options. You can either follow the directions and come up with the same thing that's advertised on the box, or you can go your own way and create your own thing. But if you take the latter option, you're almost certainly not to come up with the same end product as you were if you were to follow the instructions. But if you want to end with the same product that you have pictured on the side of that box, then you really need to follow the instructions to get there. Moses tells this story in Genesis 3 that gives us a glimpse into how sin crept into our lives today. Most of us have heard this through either Sunday school or related in popular media, but let me go ahead and give you a recap. Adam and Eve were given full domain of the Garden of Eden. They were able to live with God every day. Their needs were all met. They had everything that they could ever want. And God only had one rule. However, Satan, disguised as a snake, came along and questioned God on behalf of Eve and Adam. He said to Eve, "Are you sure that God actually said this and meant this? Surely you won't die. But God just doesn't want you to be like him." And so instead of trusting in God, Eve went ahead and listened to the serpent. Eve took that particular fruit from the particular tree, ate of it, and then had her husband follow suit. Now Adam and Eve knew the difference between right and wrong. They knew what they were doing was in rebellion to God. And they knew that God would be angry at them. This left them ashamed. This act of rebellion took away the eternal carefree existence that Adam and Eve had at their fingertips. It caused them to live separate from God, as we live separate from God today. This ended that eternal fellowship that they had with God. They were no longer able to walk hand in hand with God, walking beside God in the garden, in his presence, day in and day out, like they once were. The law of Moses is made up of 613 different laws that show us what's right, what's clean, and what's wrong, or what's opposed to God. But these 613 different things are not the only things that are sinful, that are not the only things that are unclean. In fact, you can probably boil this down in the same way James, the brother of Jesus, boiled this down whenever he said, "Whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him that is sin." Paul, an apostle of Jesus, echoes the same thing when he says, "For whatever does not proceed from faith is sin." You see, much like the Lego set, we can either follow God's instructions for our life, or either through his word that he's given to us, or through the conscience that we have that he's embedded within us. Or we can either go and do our own thing, take our own stab at it, ignoring his instruction set that he's given us. Paul puts it this way in his letter to the Romans of the day. He says, "For when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves. Even though they do not have the law, they show that the work of the law is written on their hearts. while their conscience also bears witness and their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them. We can either study these instructions through His Word and listen to our conscience and do only what we know to be right, and then staying away from what we know to be wrong, living up to that standard of perfection. Or we can go and do our own thing and cast away these instructions. The bad news is, at some point, we've all done the latter. We've all ignored God's instructions. We've all ignored our own conscience in way to allow ourselves to fulfill our own selfish desires, taking us away from that perfect standard that God has for both Himself and for us. If we continue down this path of thinking and continue to do what we know is wrong and what God teaches is wrong, this path leads to only destruction and only pain and heartache, not only for those people around us, for ourselves and for God. However, there's really good news. You see, God knew that we were going to make mistakes before He even created us. He knew the choice that Eve was going to take and the choice that Adam was going to take. And because we've messed up and because we can't live to that perfect standard, God limited Himself down to a physical human body and something that experiences pain and heartache and weariness like we do and exhaustion. And then He went and died a very brutal and painful death after living that perfect life in which He desires us to live. And because of this sacrifice, all we have to do is put our faith and trust into His Son, Jesus Christ, who did all these things, and allow Him to be the substitute for the painful death that we deserve. This faith allows us to be reconciled with God, being seen as perfect as His Son was perfect, despite all of our flaws. I hope that you will continue to follow me as we learn more about the nature of this God and the story between the creation of Adam and Eve and the sacrifice of His Son, Jesus Christ. May God keep you and bless you. Really quick, before you go, let me explain why I felt led to start this channel. When talking to Pilate, Jesus said, "I have come into the world to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate responds by asking, "What is the truth?" It's evident that a lot of people are still asking this question almost 2,000 years later. And while we live in an amazing time with the wealth of the world's knowledge available in the palm of our hands, there's often too much information, leaving people unable to process what's true and what's not true. Paul describes such times in this way when he writes his second letter to his disciple Timothy: "Always learning and never able to arrive at a knowledge of the truth." There are several who expound on what truth is, but often they are misguided, or they are malice in their intent, or they're being intellectually dishonest. My hope is that I am able to provide evidence for why the scriptural narrative is true, a contextual and practical explanation of the principles found in its writings, and a defense for other believers. As Peter explains, you should always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. If you find value in this channel as I do, there are a few ways you can help, both by gifting and without spending any money. First, react and interact with these videos wherever you're watching from. This greatly helps the channel be seen by others and new people. Next, please share this content with others you feel may benefit from the information found here. Also, please subscribe to this channel on all social media. And finally, if you feel led to, and if you have the means to, please consider giving to this channel through the outlets previously mentioned, or the channel's Patreon. All these links are going to be in the video description. Thank you for watching, and may God keep you and bless you.